Now we're going to move on and hear from some practitioners about how they use formative assessment during their projects. And just by way of introduction, when we say formative assessment, we're talking about assessment that happens during instruction to help learners see where they stand with relation to the learning outcomes. So this is in contrast with summative assessment, which is performed as a concluding or summing up kind of assessment at the end of a stage of instruction, for example, the public product. All right, so in formative assessment, there are so many different ways that you can do it. We have traditional ways like paper and pencil quizzes, but it really helps to expand your thinking beyond this. You can perform assessment simply by observing how a classroom activity is carried out. So you can have a round robin kind of task where the teacher takes part in the task just as if the teacher were one of the participating students, but the teacher makes note of student performance during the task. You can have integrated performance assessments, which are a series of events beginning with an input, which could be a video or a reading, progressing through a negotiation or interpersonal stage, and ending with a presentational stage. You can have simple checklists as whether things are done or not done, or checking on the level of knowledge. I know this or I don't know this. That is a formative assessment. It's like taking stock of where you are and where you need to go. Other possible methods include reflective journaling. You can have peer assessment. In other words, learners are assessing one another's skills, knowledge, and dispositions, but this should be low stakes, right? You shouldn't ever have a student determining another student's grade. All right. Here are some examples. Now, these might be presented in English or they might be presented in a target language. It depends. At the beginning level, it's always a question whether how much English you should use, because students may not be able to handle the target language enough to do to respond to sophisticated prompts. Let's look at these individual reflection style formative assessments. If students are tabulating, are assessing themselves on how well they did when they were trying to put survey results into a summary, they can simply say how hard it was for them. They're reflecting on their own learner. Or down at the bottom, maybe they got more than they expected. That would be a very good outcome. Or everything just went by in a blur and they couldn't follow anything. So these are rubrics for students to circle the statement that best matches what they feel like. You can also have reflection on group processes. You will note that Yao was talking about assessing group work, how well students collaborate with one another. So you can have items like these. All right, you can have language-specific, language skills type assessments. So for those, you can ask students, this is particularly good for beginning learners, just have them circle the things that they do recognize, the things that they're pretty sure that they do understand. Or you can have a very traditional style item like the second item, which is a translation problem. So there's only one of those Chinese choices that is grammatically correct. All right, so having offered you just a few of those items to consider, I would like to invite our panelists to step in. First off, I would like to invite Adam Ross, who we have heard from before. Adam teaches at the Chinese American International School in San Francisco. Adam?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, your sound is very good.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm sharing my screen and I have a brief presentation for you. Oops, I'm sort of hitting the wrong button. I need to present, not share. Okay, does everyone see my screen?
Yes, visibility
okay.
is good.
Terrific. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about how I have been implementing formative assessment, particularly using online tools in a PBLL interview unit project that I've developed. And just to give you a quick introduction to what this is, since I talked about project squares last week, I thought I'd share a project square that I developed for this project 3 years ago. And the idea, very briefly, and you can just read through this on your own, but very briefly, we're asking our students to find a recent Chinese immigrant to California. I'm talking to you from San Francisco, California, to learn about their experiences here, their difficulties, things they like about the U.S. or perspectives on the U.S., all sorts of different questions. And then my original idea was to create a web page having to do with this Chinese American life. And over time, it's developed into people of Beijing or people of China, and different, there's been different titles for this project each year. And the purpose is for our middle school students and also high school students that I teach in an online class to learn about Chinese immigration, both in terms of activities that we do to scaffold the experience, and then directly from actual Chinese immigrants. The product that students create is to create an actual video introduction, a little mini documentary about their subject, which they narrate over. And then the original audience was just simply for students in our community, but we have a different audience this year, which I'll share with you in a moment. And so just hold that thought. I want to share with you, not everything is showing. Oh, here we go. I had it in that way. We use a number of online tools to facilitate the interviews this year. On the left-hand side, you'll see that I mentioned Skype and Snagit. Skype, I think most people are familiar with to do online chats and discussions. Snagit is a tool that you can add that will actually record both sides of an online conversation, so that when you're recording, you can record your own voice from the mic, and it'll pick up the person you're speaking with online. And then students will use a tool like iMovie to actually edit the footage of their video into their final product. But on the right-hand side is mostly what I want to talk about. That these are 3 tools available online, both available in free versions as well as paid versions in the case of Flipgrid, that can support formative assessment in the project. So these are Padlet, Google Forms, which probably most of you are familiar with, and then Flipgrid, which is a very powerful tool. And I'll give you little demos of that as well. So I'm going to skip right out of my presentation and share with you other screens in my browser, and I want to make sure that you can see this. Is everyone's Stephen, can you tell me if you can see the Pebbles page from?
Yes, it's visible.
Great, thank you. So I'm sure you may or may not have been shared this page from the NFLRC staff, but for those of us who have taken part in the summer workshop, we have published our units. And so the one I'm talking about, if you want to learn further, is down here with the CASE logo, the Chinese American International School where I work. And you can go in and click on this at any point and read more about it. I'm clicking on it now, and it's hopefully coming up. There it is. And you can read about this project in more detail. However, this year, our project is a little different because we have a different challenge. There is an organization that's actually located here in San Francisco called the 1990 Institute that runs a yearly video contest for students all across the U.S. to submit videos on some subjects about China or Chinese people. Most of the video submissions are in English, but they have a contest for Mandarin speakers, and that's what we're doing. We're actually following the rubrics of the contest to interview a Chinese person, and I'll make a little plug. I talked to them and said, maybe you should do a project like we've been doing, and they've actually been, they're doing that. It's ongoing right now, and our students need to finish by the end of the month. You'll see here February 28th is when it's due, and it's again to interview a recent Chinese immigrant. And so they have all sorts of information here and ideas that they can do, and they actually have rules as well. I'm going to scroll all the way down to show you that they have a number of questions that must be asked. So this was our starting point for this year's project, to get students to come up with ways that they can think of these questions in Chinese. So what I did with my online students, whoops, let me get my right page. I'm going to go to my Padlet page. Here it is here, where I actually raise these questions with our students. They found translations for these four questions, and then the next step was to come up with additional questions, follow-up questions based on their own ideas. So this is all in Chinese, but what I've done is I've created a column for each student. So here's one student whose Chinese name is Hu Geran. Here's another student whose name is He Songping, and they're sharing with each other in live time in our online class the questions they want to ask, and they've listed things down. And in terms of formative assessment, you may see here in the second column that I've highlighted some characters. And this is where I'm suggesting that maybe the way they've written doesn't quite make sense. So He Songping, for his second question, he wrote, 你下一次去美国会做什么? Which is saying literally is, next time you go to the US, what might you do? And I said, well, Songping, they're already here in the US and we're here in the US. So going to the US doesn't quite make sense. You probably have to change this into 来美国 or coming to the US. And then I've done this for other sentences as well, highlighted text and talked with them live while they're writing, so that everyone can hear this sort of feedback as they're working. And then by using Padlet, students come up with their own questions, and then they can see what other students have to ask. They can borrow these questions, they can offer comments if they think it's a good question, and so on. And this was actually an actual 20-30 minute long activity that we did together. Another activity that we did with our middle school students engaging in the same project is to use Google Forms. So again, we created a page here, just simply says interview. We ask students to select what section they in. We give them a little template about how to introduce themselves. So this very first sentence says, 我是中美国际学校的学生，我叫 blank blank blank. 谢谢你接受我们的访问. So I am a student at CASE, the Chinese American International School. My name is, and they say their name. Thank you for willing to be interviewed by us. And then we've taken the four must-answer questions that they've already translated, and then ask them to think, what are some possible follow-up questions? This could be follow-up question A or follow-up question B, and write in your version of a question here, and then do the same thing for the question 2, and so on. And so the students did this a couple weeks ago at the start of the month. We can look at all of their answers here. Oh, wait a minute. Let me do the summary responses. There's all of our students, there's our answers, and here are all of their answers together. But typically, this is something that's only shared with the teacher. So we have to go in and look at these together. We can actually download an entire spreadsheet of all of their questions, and then highlight individual responses and copy paste things that they might want to change for them. But this is one way for the students to actually brainstorm and ensure that they've done this level of thinking of question and answer together with us. And then the third tool I want to show is Flipgrid. And so this is something literally I just published yesterday for our students. And so I've created a little video page here. You won't be able to hear it, but if I click it, the students will open it up. And they'll hear me saying in Chinese, you've come up with an outline of what your interview would be like. Think about how you might want to do a voiceover, and so a voiceover of what the contest would be. So each student just wrote out something they might say and shared it last night with each other, and then they published this. And the nice thing about Flipgrid is that this first student, Fang Xule, published her answer, and then anyone who comes in later can go listen to see what she had to say. So if a student is stuck and doesn't know what to say, they can go in and hear what their classmates are doing. Is something that's truly formative. I don't know what to do. What has Fang Xule said? Oh, so maybe she's giving me some ideas about how I can phrase what I have to phrase. It's just simply some practice for learning how to say what you want to do in your voiceover for your video. And then just finally, this is just to show the summative project. This is just the start of a video that a student did last year in Beijing, where we did a a similar interview where she's in a homestay interviewing her homestay mom over dinner, and she has a narration over it. She explains that she comes from Inner Mongolia originally, and then it goes on to say that she eventually moved to Beijing and so on, and then gives her story within a 2 or 3 minute video. So I want to make sure I'm not going over time, so I will stop here and um, share my coordinates with you, and then check with Stephen if he has any questions for me based on what was on